Good. Okay, so welcome to the second talk of the Education and Diversity session. Our speaker is Mark Hutchinson, who got his bachelor's degree here in 1981, and he's now an IT consultant and software instructor in Durham. I'm personally very excited to hear this talk because there are so I was an undergrad here, and there are very few lectures from my education that I distinctly remember, but one of them is when Steve Weiss taught me recursion. And so I can't wait to hear this. So please, Mark, go ahead.
Thank you. I am Mark Hutchinson. I'm a 1981 graduate in Bachelor of Science with a Math Sciences option from Chapel Hill. And I'm currently an IT consultant. So, okay, you've heard the distinguished alums. Now it's my turn. The speaking committee needed to get some balance in the whole thing. I'm here to share experiences with Steve, how I interacted with him during school, after school, how he influenced my career, especially the software instruction part. I want to tell you how he's influenced me, entertain you for about 20 minutes, not including laughter. Hopefully I will entertain you to that point, and give a powerful presentation. So if Holland's theory is correct, speeches such as mine could be a powerful source of renewable green energy, but we have to have the permission of some faculty who knew me as an undergraduate in order to configure magnets and wires to their corpse, because you know they're going to be spinning in their grave at the moment that I'm speaking. Collins is looking for volunteers. So let me talk about the courses that I taught indirectly through Annette Foster. Yeah, through Annette, there was Comp 14, the Introduction to Programming, but Steve was in charge of the instructors there, so I got part of Steve's influence through Annette. Took Comp 120, took Finite Automata, and it's been too long, so I don't even remember what that Finite Automata number was, the class number was. But 181? 181. Okay, the consensus is it was 180. I took 181. My most memorable undergraduate experience with Steve was in the fall of 1980. I'm walking up the stairs at New West House, and this familiar voice comes walking out of the office downstairs, and Steve's going, "Mark, are you still here? We're going to have to do something about getting you tenure." And I went, no, guarantee this is my last year. So that threat of being a tenured undergraduate just sent shockwaves through me. Now, you see, even though I did graduate in 1981, I should have graduated in 1977. So at that point, Steve and other professors, faculty, were probably very tired of seeing me semester after semester. I guess in some ways I am distinguished, but distinguished by the longevity of my undergraduate career. That's a mixed blessing of sorts. So my postgraduate relationship with Steve is working with him to get the undergraduate degree program. So when I got to Carolina, they didn't have an undergraduate degree for computer science. They had a BS in math science, BS in math with computer science option. A fine degree, but still didn't say computer science. I also worked with Steve, writing him letters of commendation, also spinning in their grave at this point. Steve was up for many teaching awards, and we came close to actually getting you Professor of the Year one time. You finished in the top 10, top 11? No, the big national one.
I got the state.
You got one at the state, but he almost got the big one for the nation. So yeah, writing letters of commendation, because at that point my teaching career was in full swing, and I could say, that guy knows how to teach. Oh yeah. It was at that point that I first learned about the influence of Mr. Wizard, Don Herbert, on Steve and his. And so Steve's model was Mr. Wizard, And I'm going, oh, well, that's interesting because I remember watching Mr. Wizard as well. It's like, oh, this is good. And then in the early to mid 2000s, Steve and Don Stannett collaborated with me and looked at some algorithms that I had discovered or developed. And so it got to a point where I was actually collaborating with Steve as a colleague, as a research colleague. And I'm going, okay, this is really, really nice to be able to continue this many decades relationship from teacher to colleague. Hopefully I'm a colleague. Let me get on to my professional career. So even before I graduated, I had about 3.5 years of work experience. I was a student programmer for Erwin Danziger, who's not here, at ADP. I told him I'd at least mention him. I was at Blue Cross and Blue Shield in tech support. Now in tech support, I was in charge of new programmer orientation. So everybody who came in new, I oriented them to what the IT system was going to be like if they hadn't used TSO, ISPF, PDF, that word soup of old 3270. Yeah, and how things worked within Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and also coordinated the training. We were responsible for training, whether we was developing internal programming talent or training programmers, arranging for training classes for our existing programming staff to lift them up, and learned that there's a lot more to teaching than platform time. So there's thinking about the learning process, thinking about the teaching process. Also, problems that came to me were opportunities to learn. So Joshua, he presents me with a problem. Okay, I don't know the solution to this. Let me hand you off to the systems programmers and database administrators. After his problem is resolved, I can then call up the folks downstairs and said, what was the underlying problem? What was the solution? So that the next time I encountered that problem, I had a much better chance of saying, this is the solution you need to take. Or to be able to say, go downstairs and tell them exactly this. So it shortened the problem resolution time. I also, in my last semester, taught at Durham Tech as an introduction to computers and business processing, or business data processing. And it was at that time that I used another one of Steve's techniques, which is using real-world examples of, let's play computer. So Gary, you have this part of the computer, and Peter, you've got this part of the computer, and we're going to have somebody out in the hallway being external disk or memory. So they got a feel for the division of work within a computer and how much time it took relative to this real fast sitting next to each other to actually go out and get data and bring it in. So real-world examples were very helpful in doing that teaching. I then moved into systems programming. Not a whole lot of teaching, but there were occasions where I had to give orientation, saying this is a new piece of software, this is how you use it. And it was after one of those orientation, introduction lessons that one of the students said, you missed your calling. You should have been a teacher. And I was like, oh, I guess through osmosis, I actually picked something up. It's good stuff. I then moved in the 90s into full-time contract software instruction, and rode that sweet wave of Windows graphical user interface. Everybody's changing, lots and lots of work to do, no end of work in that period. So I did learn that chaos necessitates learning, and it's also at that point in my career that I understood I'm free. I don't have to be next to this lectern. I can move about. I already warned the camera people that this was going to happen, and realized after I started moving around, it kept people's attention. It kept people on their toes. That voice where they had to pay attention was different places in the room. And I got that from Steve, because Steve was pretty much nonstop at the front of his classes. Truly nonstop. Higher tech was my training, and also I was lucky to have other professional software instructors to help me along when I was making the transition into full-time professional software instruction. It was nice to know things, classroom management, expectations management. But the basis of what makes a good instructor or a bad instructor, I learned from Steve. Also learned at that point and later, there was a benchmark. Whenever I would encounter a teacher, and that was even true when I was taking IBM classes and I was a systems programmer. There's good teachers and not so good teachers. And unfortunately for them, the not good teachers, Steve had set a fairly high bar for me to understand or judge what was a good teacher or not a good teacher. I went into consulting, and even in consulting, you're doing a lot of communication. And I take a teaching approach, because not only in teaching, it isn't lecture, 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 lecture. It's understanding your students. Understanding when you're reaching your students, or when the lulled head and the drag tongue, you're not reaching your students. So most communications can be thought of as teaching opportunities. So let me talk about some miscellaneous other times I've taught. This is less of a mainstream software instruction and just instruction in general. I've been teaching Aikido, which is a Japanese martial art, fall down, go boom, get up and repeat, since 1989. And I've been blessed to have good instructors on my sensei chain of events, but I've also been able to tell from prior learning, oh, this instructor is it's a good sensei about teaching, or a mediocre or not so good sensei about teaching. So it isn't just software, it isn't just technology, it also pervades other things to learn, and my exposure to other teachers, whether or not a teacher is good, mediocre, or bad. I've started a bunch of user groups, I've run them, I've done presentations at meetings, and user groups are another time where I've taught, I've recruited speakers, I've helped those speakers with their presentations. So it's an opportunity for me to do teaching, but less in a formal corporate or educational setting, and more as a professional group. In conferences and symposia, I've gotten to a point where, at least in the Raleigh, the Raleigh code camps, which are held most Novembers, I've gotten to a point where we've set up and I run or co-run a train the trainer session for presenters. A lot of people don't present very often, and we have to help them prepare for their very first presentation. So I'm now taking what I've learned and then passing that on to be able to help other people with their presentations. I've written articles. Now articles, you go, well, that's writing an article. How's that teaching? It's teaching without that immediate feedback. I don't get the eye contact. I don't get the raised hands and the questions. I don't get the that look of confusion. You don't get that, but you're still doing teaching. You have to think about that learning process while you're writing the article. And I've done a couple of videos, and it struck me that there's now a second connection with Steve, because another one of my video inspirations is Alton Brown from the Food Network, Good Eats. Alton Brown created that show with three inspirations and models: Julia Child, Monty Python, Don Herbert, Mr. Wizard. So now Mr. Wizard comes back into it at the video level. Let's see. Excellent. Things that I've learned. This is a general, please take this with you whenever you have the opportunity to teach or help somebody else teach. Things that I learned: have mastery over your subject matter. Be a subject matter expert. Do not attempt to open the book 15 minutes before class and then teach that thing that you've just read. This is a really, really bad idea, because somebody in your class is going to ask you a question, and that 15 minutes of reading is not going to prepare you for that. You need to understand beyond 15 minutes of book reading whatever it is you're going to teach. Second thing, take the students from what they already know into what you want to teach them. This is a mapping. They already know something. You have to find out what that something is in order to map that. This thing is like this. This thing is like that. You need to understand, and going along with that, you need to understand your audience every bit as much as the material that you're teaching. So you need to understand the real world. What's happening in society? What athletic teams are winning locally or losing locally? We okay? Okay. Beeps are sometimes disconcerting. Do I need to back up? Okay. So know the real world, know what's happening in society, and know the profession. In addition, know the professions of your audience. So if you're trying to train plumbers, understand what plumbing is about. If you're trying to understand or train doctors, medical professionals, or whatnot, understand that profession. They have a language. They have a way of looking at the world and looking at their problems. You need to understand that in order to help train them and take them from what they know to what you want to teach them. It was nice that a doctor from a certain dark blue major healthcare facility actually asked me what my medical training was, and somewhat shocked that I didn't have medical training. But I had spent time with my clients, so I took the trouble of understanding what they thought about their medical terminology. I learned their world to better communicate with them. Physical examples really help the students understand. Playing that CPU game at Durham Tech, toys can be a great learning aid for you, playing cards, games, tricks, puzzles, etc. Think about this as the gamification of learning. Sims, nowadays we have wonderful software that can provide simulations. You can write your own simulations. You can step into simulated worlds that can help that learning process. Teaching should be fun and enjoyable for both the student and the teacher. As a teacher, if you do not enjoy the teaching process, the students will not enjoy the learning process. They're going to read it from your body language. You're going to read it from your voice, your tone, everything. So you must enjoy what you're doing up there on the platform in order for your students to enjoy it. Teachers should show by examples. If you're up at the board, you shouldn't be showing, see how brilliant I am? No. You should be showing, look how easy this is, and here are the tricks that you can use, here are the shortcuts, here are the things that you can do to do what I'm doing. It's not showing off, it's teaching. Teachers do need platform skills. As I said, teaching is more than just being up here on the platform. You have to understand expectations management. If a student's having trouble, you don't say the same thing slower and louder and expect the student to understand it better. You have to bridge that gap of misunderstanding or non-understanding. Because teaching is, after all, an interactive process, not just a lecture. And lastly, the last thing I learned from Steve is that state machines are awesome. In conclusion, and to hand out, this is the thank yous part of it. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Don Herbert, wherever you are. Thank you, Carolina. Go Heels! Thank you, Computer Science Department, to the most patient faculty members, and for preparing me for my career. If I had time, I'd tell you about a big brained up. I'll tell you at the banquet tonight. But surprisingly enough, 98% of all of those questions they asked me over that 2-day period, I was able to answer because of the preparation I received here in the department. Thank you, Fred Brooks, for starting this 50 years ago. And thanks to my parents for all their love.
Thank you.
Oh, excuse me. Can Steve, will you stand up for a moment? Diane.
Mark, you gave some excellent examples of how to be a great teacher. What prepared you to be a great presenter, speaker? Did you participate in things like Toastmasters? You didn't get up there the first time and was able to clearly speak and present information?
No, I actually have given the bad presentations where I was reading, and I realized afterwards, and this was right out of college, about 83, that, oh man, this is just awful. But sometimes it's feedback, sometimes it's, self-reflection. What could I have done better? What can we do better? Any feedback is really, really helpful. And the more experienced the presenter that you have exposure to, the better your feedback's going to be. And it's also why I volunteer to sit in on prep sessions for PhD candidates going through their dissertation defense. Turns out I'm a question savant. In addition to being a senior software instructor, I'm a question savant. So I'm actually hitting them up for their presentation, their content. No, you've got a big gap, a big gaping hole in your presentation right there. You don't want to take that into your defense. So, yeah, I don't know where it came from. I'd like to attribute at least part of that to Steve. Also being thrown up at the front of a class of martial artists where, oh, I have to do something and it's physical and somebody's going to hit the ground.
How have you stayed current as the technology has moved along and you're possibly not a full-time practitioner, programmer, or developer, or whatever?
Oh, but I am.
Are you?
Yes.
Okay. You said you were a full-time teacher.
Yes, but because I usually get the higher tech classes, I have to stay current. And it helped that I was a full-time systems programmer in the 80s, so it's like, okay, I have this deep understanding of what goes on in the systems. And I've just continued to stay as current as possible with new languages, new databases, new whatever. But that's a whole different talk.
Thank you. Oh. No. Any others? Thanks again.
Thank you.